Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping into a world that, well, it didn't just redefine fantasy. It gave us this really profound way of thinking about history itself.
Absolutely.
We're talking, of course, about J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium. The whole vast tapestry, the Silmarillion, the Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
But we're not just doing lore today. This is a deep dive into Tolkien's whole philosophical take, maybe even theological take, on time, existence, how worlds work.
Yeah, his whole worldview really comes through.
So our mission here is to unpack two themes that seem kind of contradictory, but they're deeply linked in his work. First, this constant idea of cyclical decline. Each age seems a bit dimmer than the last.
Right, the fading.
But then, alongside that, you get this amazing concept he called Eucatastrophe, that sudden, totally unexpected burst of joy that just cuts through despair.
That sudden turn, yeah.
It's brilliant. And we want to explore how this tension, this push and pull between decline and joy, is shaped by, well, everything, really. His Catholic faith, definitely.
Well, fundamentally.
His own life experiences, his academic work as a scholar. We'll be looking at his letters, the Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, obviously, his other writings too.
Lots of good stuff to draw on.
Okay, let's unpack this fascinating vision of history then.
Great. Well, it's striking just how fundamental this theme of decline is. It's not just, a later addition. It's baked in right from the very start.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
Like the Silmarillion beginning.
Exactly. In the Anil Dale, the music of the Ainur, which picks off the Silmarillion, you see it there, the original harmony, the perfect music of creation, it gets marred almost instantly by Melkor's discord.
Ah, the first Dark Lord.
Right. Tolkien writes how discord arose about him, and many that sang nigh him grew despondent. That first note of wrongness.
Wow. So before anything's even really physically made, the potential for things to go downhill is already there. Does that kind of mirror, say, Christian ideas of original sin affecting everything?
You can definitely see that parallel, yeah. From that first disruption, Middle-earth's history isn't just things happening. It's marked by this gradual, sort of entropic waning.
Waning.
Yeah, the corruption creeps and builds. Elves get corrupted. Kingdoms fall into ruin. Beauty fades over time. It's absolutely foundational to how he built the world.
And this wasn't just storytelling for him, right? It connected to his personal beliefs. I remember that quote from letter #131.
Oh, the long defeat one.
Yeah, where he says, actually, I have a Christian and indeed a Roman Catholic, so that I do not expect history to be anything but a long defeat.
Though it contains some samples or glimpses of final victory. Yeah, that's the one.
So how does that idea, long defeat, play out? Is it just pessimism?
No, not at all. That's really important. It's not cynicism. For Tolkien, it's more of a moral and spiritual view of history.
Right.
It's rooted in his belief that in our fallen world, all good things are, sadly, vulnerable to decay, to entropy, to corruption. They will fade eventually. It's about acknowledging how fragile goodness is against time and evil.
That's a really insightful way to put it. It suggests that, maybe the most powerful stories, even fantasy, often come from an author's deepest convictions about how the world actually works. Gives them that weight. Okay, so thinking about this long defeat, this gradual decline, how does Tolkien actually show it? Does he build it into the structure of his world?
Oh, absolutely. He structures it right into the timeline. The whole Legendarium is divided into these distinct ages.
Right, the first, second, third ages.
Exactly. And if you look closely, each age that follows is marked by, well, bigger losses. The light dims a little more each time.
Can you give us an example? Like the first age?
Okay, the first age, it's epic, right? Valar walking the earth, incredible elven kingdoms. But how does it end? In the War of Wrath, this cataclysmic war that literally sinks a whole continent, Beleriand.
Wow.
And yeah, Morgoth is defeated, but think of the cost. Ancient, glorious realms like Gondolin, Doriath gone, countless great elves die. The world itself is diminished.
So even victory comes with immense loss. What about the second age?
Second age, that's the story of Numenor. This amazing island kingdom of men, blessed with long life, wisdom, power. But what happens? Pride gets the better of them.
Ah, and Sauron's influence, right?
Exactly. Sauron manipulates them, feeds their pride, and it leads to this absolutely catastrophic downfall, like Atlantis, basically. The Akalabeth tells how the doom of Numenor was at hand. and the elves were filled with grief and fear, a whole civilization just wiped out by its own arrogance.
And then we get to the Third Age, the
Yes.
setting for the Lord of the Rings.
Right, and by then, it's clearly a time of faded glory, isn't it? The elves are leaving. Gondor is powerful, yes, but it's described as a shadow of Numenor, its ancestor state.
Mm-hmm.
And even the final victory over Sauron, the War of the Ring, which is huge, it directly causes the magic of the Elven Rings to fade, speeding up the departure of the elves. Tolkien explicitly says the Third Age was ending and the days of the elves were over.
It really sounds like those old classical myths, or even Christian ideas of a golden age, then silver, then iron.
Precisely. A fall from an initial peak, and you never quite get back there. It definitely pushes back against any simple idea of history always meaning progress. Sometimes it means loss.
Okay, amidst all this decline, you mentioned fading. That seems really central, especially for the elves. It's such a poignant idea. Their tragedy isn't dying like men.
No, it's something else. It's this enduring sorrow of watching the world they love change, decay, move on, while they remain bound to it but powerless to stop the change.
That's deep.
It is. They don't just die, they diminish. Their connection to Middle-earth weakens. Galadriel captures it perfectly in Fellowship, doesn't she, when she accepts her fate. I will diminish and go into the West and remain Galadriel.
Such a powerful line. It's acceptance, but it's sad.
It's incredibly bittersweet. She knows her time, the time of her people in Middle-earth, is ending.
And the Rings of Power, the Elven Rings especially, were meant to fight this fading, weren't they?
That was their whole purpose. Celebrimbor and the Gwaithai Madain made them specifically to preserve things, to hold back time's decay, to keep the elven realms beautiful and unchanged.
Like Rivendell and Lothlorien.
Exactly. Those places feel timeless because of the ring's power, but it was always a temporary measure tied to the one ring once the one is
The
destroyed.
three lose their power.
Right. And Lothlorien and Rivendell begin to fade too. But what's interesting is how Tolkien presents this. It's not seen as a failure, really. It's necessary. The elves have to let go for the next stage of history, the Age of Men, to truly begin.
He had that great quote about it in letter #181, didn't he? About the elves wanting to have their cake and eat it.
Yes, that sums it up perfectly. He said they represented the artistic, aesthetic parts of humanity raised to a higher level, but they wanted to have their cake and eat it, to live in the mortal historical world because they had become fond of it, but also to possess it, with minds more like immortal gods than men.
So they couldn't quite reconcile their immortal nature with a changing mortal world.
Exactly. And so fading becomes the price of that impossible desire of holding on too tightly to something that's meant to pass. It really makes you think, what are we trying to hold on to maybe too tightly when change is actually needed?
That's a very pointed question. Okay, so despite all of this, the long defeat, the fading, the decline, Tolkien's stories don't feel like tragedies in the end. There's this profound hope.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, brings us to maybe his most unique contribution, Eucatastrophe.
Ah, yes. Eucatastrophe is such a brilliant concept. He coined it himself, didn't he, in his essay on fairy stories?
He did. How did he define it?
He called it the sudden joyous turn, the good catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's not just a happy ending tacked on. It's crucial that it happens when things like absolutely bleakest.
Like truly hopeless.
Precisely. It's a sudden, miraculous, unlooked-for grace that breaks through the darkness. It doesn't deny the sorrow that came before, but it transforms the outcome.
Okay, walk us through the prime example. It has to be Mount Doom, right?
Oh, absolutely. The destruction of the ring is the Eucatastrophe of the Lord of the Rings. Think about it. Frodo is at the cracks of doom. He's carried the ring all this way. He's the hero.
Yeah.
And he fails.
Completely fails. Claims the ring for himself.
Yes. He's utterly overcome. All seems lost. It's the ultimate disaster. And then Gollum.
Gollum's desperation.
Gollum attacks Frodo, bites off his finger to get the ring back, and then in his mad joy, he just trips, falls into the fire, destroying himself and the ring.
It's completely unexpected. And it's not Frodo's heroic act that saves the day.
Exactly. It's this chaotic, desperate intervention. Tolkien even commented on this directly in letter #192. He said, Frodo indeed failed as a hero, but this failure was redressed.
Redressed? How?
Because in this myth, he wrote, the cause was triumphant by unexpected eucatastrophic grace. It wasn't just Frodo's strength, but the sudden, almost divine intervention turning disaster into deliverance.
That completely changes how you think about happy endings. It's not about everything being perfect or earned, necessarily. It's about light appearing when you least expect it, when all rational hope is gone. You can almost see echoes of that in real life sometimes, those moments where things just inexplicably turn around.
That's the power of the concept, I think. It resonates deeply.
So we have Eucatastrophe bringing this sudden joy.
Mm.
But the world itself, the fading, the decline that still happens, right? The elves still leave, magic diminishes.
Yes, the Eucatastrophe doesn't reset everything to a lost golden age. The renewal it brings is, well, it's bittersweet.
Bittersweet renewal. How do we see that?
Well, look at Aragorn becoming king. That's definitely a renewal. Gondor is restored, the line of kings is back, the white tree blooms again in Minas Tirith, a powerful symbol. Tolkien writes, and at the mess that followed, the new tree grew and blossomed, and the people of the city rejoiced. There's real hope there. But it's not a return to the glory of Numenor, let alone the First Age. This renewal comes with the end of the elves' time, the fading of magic. It's a renewal specifically for men. And even Aragorn, the great King LSR, is mortal. He will die. The long defeat continues in a sense, just transformed.
So the victory isn't total, but it's real. It shows that goodness can still emerge.
Exactly. It affirms that even within this overarching pattern of decline, courage, virtue, sacrifice, and that unexpected grace can still make a difference. Good can still flourish, just in a new, perhaps more fragile way.
It reminds me of another letter, hashtag 181, where Tolkien talks about the conflict not being purely black and white. He says the story has a good side and a bad side, beauty versus ugliness, freedom versus tyranny.
But both sides, in some degree, conservative or destructive, want a measure of control.
Yes, that's a really nuanced point. Even the good guys aren't perfect, and renewal doesn't mean perfection. All right, okay, if we zoom out a bit, all of this, the decline, the Eucatastrophe, the bittersweet renewal, it's not just plot. It's clearly coming from somewhere deep within Tolkien himself. His background must play a huge role.
Oh, massively. You can't separate this vision of history from his personal faith, his experiences, particularly in World War I, and his academic work as a philologist. Someone steeped in ancient languages and myths.
How did that academic side shape the feel of his history?
Well, he didn't just write a story. He built this incredible deep time behind it. Millennia of history, languages evolving, peoples migrating, wars fought long before Frodo was even born.
That feeling of immense age in Middle-earth.
Exactly. That deep perspective does two things. It really emphasizes the scale of the decline over vast ages, but it also makes the moments of renewal, when they come, feel incredibly significant and earned, emerging from this vast sweep of time.
And the myths he studied, especially the northern ones.
Huge influence. C.S. Lewis called it northerness, that sort of stern, melancholic grandeur you find in Old Norse and Anglo-Saxon myths. Think Beowulf, think Ragnarok.
A sense of heroic doom.
Precisely. Tolkien admired that spirit of courage in the face of inevitable defeat. But, and this is crucial, he didn't just copy it, he took that northern heroic ideal and infused it with Christian hope. The Norse heroes fight knowing they'll lose. Tolkien's heroes fight knowing defeat is likely. But Eucatastrophe is possible.
So his faith wasn't just a background element. It was actively shaping the narrative structure. Like he said in the letter hashtag 131, The Lord of the Rings is a fundamentally religious and Catholic work.
Unconsciously at first, but consciously in the revision.
Yeah.
Yes, you can really see the entire historical arc fall, suffering, decline, punctuated by moments of sudden redemption mirroring the broader Christian story of salvation history. It's woven right into the fabric of the legendarium.
Okay, so the Third Age ends. The elves depart. This marks a massive shift. The beginning of the Fourth Age, the Age of Men. Does Tolkien give us much of a picture of what that's like?
He actually leaves it quite open. Deliberately so, I think. It's characterized simply as the Age of Men. They're mortal, they're fallible, but now they're the ones in charge. They're free to shape Middle-earth's future, for good or ill, without the direct guidance or overshadowing presence of elves or Mare.
No detailed chronicles of the Fourth Age, then?
Not really. We get glimpses, mainly through the appendices, like the tale of Aragorn and Arwen. That story is very telling.
How so?
It shows Aragorn, the great king, accepting his mortality with grace. And Arwen, who chose to become mortal for him, faces the true elvish sorrow, loss, and grief, but also finds profound love. Their story kind of closes the book on the elder days and firmly establishes this new human era.
But it's not presented as a perfect utopia, this Age of Men.
Definitely not. Tolkien hinted it wouldn't be easy. In letter hashtag 154, he wrote something quite stark. The Fourth Age began, but it was not a bright or hopeful age. The dominion of men is not presented as a reward or a triumph. It is simply the next step.
Wow, so new challenges, new struggles, just human ones now.
Exactly. The stage is set for human history with all its potential and all its pitfalls.
So wrapping this all up then, if we try to summarize Tolkien's view of history as presented in his legendarium. It feels like maybe tragic realism tempered with grace comes close.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. He shows decline as this constant, almost inevitable force. Beauty fades, kingdoms fall, even the best heroes can falter at the crucial moment.
Like Frodo at Mount Doom.
Right, and it's a huge but. Through Eucatastrophe, through those sudden, unexpected, miraculous turns, hope endures. It's not denied, it just comes differently than expected.
So joy isn't about sorrow being absent.
Not at all. In Tolkien's world, joy is often the surprising companion to sorrow. You see it everywhere, from the fall of Gondolin, leaving echoes that inspire future hope, right up to Aragorn's crowning happening only after immense loss. He shows us that even in a world that is fundamentally bent towards decay, renewal is still possible. Grace can still break in.
And he connected this directly to his faith in that On Fairy Stories essay, didn't he?
He did, quite explicitly. He called the birth of Christ the eucatastrophe of man's history, and the resurrection the eucatastrophe of the story of the incarnation. For him, the ultimate true story begins and ends in joy, even through suffering.
That's incredibly powerful. It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What insights can we maybe draw from Tolkien's very deep, very nuanced view of history, this mix of decline and grace about how we navigate our own times, and maybe how we can learn to recognize those unexpected moments of grace, those eucatastrophes, when they appear in our own lives or in the world around us?
It certainly offers a different perspective than simple optimism or pessimism, a deeper, perhaps more resilient kind of hope.